You are listening to the Global CTE Podcast with your host, Sylvester Chisom.
Welcome to another episode of the Global CTE Podcast. I'm your host, Sylvester Chisom, and this is the place and the space where we wrap a blanket of goodwill around the CTE community to highlight the best, the brightest, the movers, the shakers, the innovators who are really doing the work to prepare our students for success in the global marketplace. Today is no different. I have a special guest, a special treat, my friend Noah Geisel. Noah, let me tell you about Noah. He's amazing, right? He serves as the micro-credentials program manager at the University of Colorado Boulder. He co-founded the annual Badge Summit Conference and is a lecturer at the University of Colorado, Denver. With a background as a world languages, edtech, and digital badges consultant, Noah is passionate about helping educators and students make awesome happen. He has 19 years of experience teaching Spanish, English, and technology, and was recognized as the 2013 ACTFL National Language Teacher of the Year. He's a learner, sharer, traveler, and giver of high fives. I love it. Noah, welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, thank you so much. That was a great intro. I think I just need to stay close to you forever.
Man, no, you're doing so many amazing things that really are on the front end of education, pushing it forward, things more people need to know about. So I was super excited about having this conversation with you. So before we get too far, let's kind of level set here. Like, for someone who maybe is not familiar with the terms, can you briefly explain the concept of micro-credentials and badging for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great place to start out, I think, for our listeners who might not yet be familiar. And, I think the first thing I'd want to say is, especially for folks, in the CTE space where you're probably really accustomed to having federal and state, and regional and industry standards and competency frameworks and guidelines that really standardize stuff. This is still early enough that we don't necessarily have like one specific nationalized, standardized definition of these terms: micro-credential, digital badges. And so just for anybody who's listening and saying, well, that doesn't sound like what my boss said this stuff is, your boss is not wrong. I might not be wrong. Hopefully I'm not. But, generally speaking, this notion of micro-credentials is really born out of, trying to look at stuff that's more granular than, degree type credentials. And so the word micro there in a lot of situations is kind of being viewed as non-degree credentials. So stuff that's smaller than that. And, as far as how granular it goes, for me at University of Colorado Boulder, in my work I've done with school districts, I really think that you can go really as small as you want to go, as long as there's something meaningful there for somebody who, is not the teacher who came up with the credentialing program and isn't the learner's mom. Right? If there's somebody beyond those two people who cares, then it's big. Then it's big enough to be a credential, right? It's as long as there's somebody who's not bound by social contract to care, then it's big enough, right? And for the listeners, learners, we're probably talking about admissions counselors. We're talking about hiring managers, right? If they're going to be able to look at this and say, that tells me something important about the narrative of who this person is as a learner achiever, then it is worthy of credentialing in my mind. So that's a kind of holistic view of the micro-credential piece, and we can get into badges in a second, but I think
I like how you just put it into context that we're trying to create something that we can show and highlight to an admissions rep or a hiring manager. So let's take it to a class. Let's say it's a digital marketing class for high school students. What would be an example of micro-credential that could come out of a class like that?
I mean, if we're doing digital marketing, I might, encourage, if I'm a collaborated with an educator in that space, that, and they're, especially if they're of a mindset of working smart, not harder, I might encourage them to look at things like, Google's own SEO micro-credentials, right? Or Facebook's own micro-credentials that are free, for specific, skills that actually, if they're going to try and get a paid internship, apprenticeship, or job at a digital marketing agency, having those skills is stuff that employers, would much rather know you have coming in than they're going to have to pay you to learn on the clock, right? And so, and nobody's going, you're not going to take an entire semester to learn how to do one small, competency around, installing a Facebook pixel on a website, right? And so that's way smaller than a semester long course. So you wouldn't want to name a course but that might be a credential worthy opportunity.
I like it. So now we've kind of level set. We have clarity on what it is. So now let's go big, Noah. Let's go big. All right. My question.
Well, and real quick, because just in case somebody says they didn't talk badges, so I do want to
go
talk.
Go ahead. Give me badges.
So real quick, yeah. So
okay.
And I do again. I want to clarify. Some people may be in learning communities where the terms micro-credential and digital badges are being used interchangeably. I think increasingly you're going to see that not be.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, because from a clarity standpoint, is there a difference between micro-credentials and badges? Like, how would you explain that?
For me, I think yes. And again, you may be a listener, you may be in a learning context where that is not the case, and your boss is not wrong. Okay. But I think, in my context, I think increasingly that where it's going to go is, starting to really view these as two different things. And I'm an analogy person. And so, sort of like a diploma is different from a degree, and that a degree is the programmatic term. And the diploma is the representation, it is the vehicle that tells, not just gives recognition, but tells the story about the learning achievement that happened. That's what the digital badge is. The digital badge is more analogous to a diploma. Micro-credential is more analogous to the programming, right? The degree. And so, but one of the big differences between a digital badge and a diploma or a certificate, right? If, there are plenty of digital badges that are being issued where really it's, kind of just a fancy, sexy new version of, a PDF or instead of going to the bookstore and getting fancy paper and doing on a certificate, now it's a badge. But I think what's really special is folks who are in contexts where they are taking advantage of the opportunity of the digital part to actually, that you have this opportunity with the metadata to contextualize the recognition and really tell the story. So it's not just, here's what, we're credentialing them in X. It's then here's a paragraph of the description of what that means. Here's the earning criteria that somebody had to meet. So, there's this notion of credential transparency that's really taking hold, not just nationally, but internationally. And, if we take advantage of the metadata with our digital badge credentials, we're able to, really take the guesswork out for that admissions counselor, for that hiring manager, recruiter, to where they're looking at this. They don't have to guess what this is. We can say, yeah, this was earned in a weekend, or this took, 8 months. We can say somebody who earned this is the criteria that was measurable and assessed. And we can even attach evidence, right? Mm-hmm. So, imagine if you are getting a CPR first aid, card to carry in your wallet, but it's a digital badge. There could also be literally a video embedded in it showing that, yeah, I was able to sustain 60 seconds of chest compressions, right? And so it speaks to validity, it speaks to trust, it speaks also to, contextualizing and personalizing, right? I think, one of the things that critical voices, not just in the micro-credentialing space, but I think it's also very familiar in CTE. People talk about, that we are, kind of not pathways as an opportunity word, but a lot of critical voices sometimes think that we are at too early ages kind of putting, people into a specific path for a specific future. And, I think that when we take advantage of credentials to make them so individualized, like with evidence of how Noah, how Sylvester, went about, earning this, what did they do to meet that earning criteria? It really speaks to that human piece that is very difficult then to say, oh, you're just trying to, turn us into automatons and build cogs for the wheel, right?
Right. Okay. No, I want to. Can we highlight some best practices? You talked about the transparency in that international conversation in digital badging, micro credentials. What are some best practices? Some things that should be included in a badge or credential to help verify and make it easier for the hiring manager or admissions person to understand what was achieved here or processed?
Yeah, I'm reticent to use the should word, so because
Okay.
but things that I personally lean into, and I invite others to consider is, especially in the CTE space, you have, a lot of our colleagues may, in other K-12 domains, they do have school district or state or national standards. And, those standards are really focused on, the K-12 system, right? And one of the, kind of beautiful opportunities for a lot of our colleagues in the CTE space is, those standards, those competency frameworks are informed by, the actual, industries that we're preparing
Right.
the young people for, right? And so, whatever field we're in, right, that there's the National Association of Fill in the Blank, and their membership is actually a lot of times going to be the unions, the biggest corporations and companies in the space, and they're actually lending their expertise, and they're a lot of times funding, right, the creation of these competency frameworks and standards frameworks. And so I think when we're credentialing people in competencies that can align to those frameworks,
Okay.
that there's real opportunity there, right? To say, and then, just a best practice, in K-12 saying, for the last couple of generations now is can do statements, right? That, and so we can crosswalk if the standards don't already have can do statements, that's just a really great way to, move away from rubrics that have adverbs, right? Mostly, sometimes, usually, stuff that's very difficult to measure, and take more binary stuff like they can do this, right? And so it's just, there's no A plus plus, there's no like, hey, bring in a box of Kleenex, we'll get you extra credit and pass you here. It's really like, this is the competency,
Yes.
and it's zeros and ones. You've either done this or have not yet done this, and that's what determines giving the credential. And so I think that that's really, where there's just huge opportunity for the transparency and consistency, right? To where there's, from this welding shop to this welding shop to that welding shop, from this digital marketing class to this digital, there's such opportunity for you to create, an ecosystem where you're taking the guesswork out of it, of this means something no matter where we are.
And we want to go from rubrics with mostly to can do. And if we get to can do, then that should be equivalent. That should equate to a badge in that specific subject domain. Is that how we're seeing it?
And I think that can be, yeah. I
That
think
can
that
be. Okay.
it's I think it's we I think
Let
also
me.
another thing that CTE is just so privileged for is that you so often have that direct connection to somebody in industry who actually is showing up at your school 3 weeks before the end of the semester to be like, okay, who am I hiring now in a couple weeks, right? And so you have such an incredible and tight feedback loop in your world, right? To that's meaningful. It's not somebody who's is an education guru speaking at a conference. It's actually the person who's providing the value proposition for your learners. So when they're coming exploring different opportunities for their educational futures, and they come and do a tour of the CT campus or CT classroom, they're saying, what's in this for me? It's like, well, that's like, this is not just a grade, this is an opportunity, right? We have this company in our community that's going to recognize your assets and open up a door of opportunity for you because they trust this credential you're going to earn, or these suite of credentials you're going to earn.
No, so let me ask you this. So in building out said credentialing and badging program, right, in a school district or in an area per se, are you feeling like this needs to be like a real conversation between both industry and education, saying, hey, industry, for this job task, this particular job task that happens here, what are the things they need to learn that we should be teaching? If they learn these things, then you feel good about giving them a can do on this particular credential, so that we make sure we get it right. Is that kind of
Yeah, and
how?
I think there's a huge opportunity with that, and that's not going to be the right answer in every learning community, right?
Okay.
There's going to be someone in communities where that wouldn't be okay, where, like, where they're going to say, yeah, our job's not to be preparing people for industry, right? And it's great, right? But in the communities where that is, explicitly like what we're doing, I think probably, even if we're not talking about badges and micro credentials, that's probably something that's a good idea, right? And those conversations probably are already happening,
They
right?
are.
That data is probably not stuff that we need to be, re-engaging and from starting from scratch on. We have that, at national, regional, and hyper local, settings. That there's amazing, practitioners and collaborators in the industry world where that a lot of that groundwork's already done, right? And so I think if it hasn't, okay, there's a lot bigger lift here, but in most cases it probably has been, and I think it's a miss, in a whole lot of ways for our change management to not use that as a starting point, just because, and A, that's just creating new work for yourself. B, you're going to be engaging people who are saying, what about, why aren't you just looking at the notes from the last time we had this conversation? So they might not feel respected. And it's also, again, going back to that consistency piece, right? If the stuff that people who are experts in gathering that data have already done it, right? And so it's just there for us. And why wouldn't we lean on it? If they're telling us this is what we're looking for, let's create the crosswalks to where we can say, yeah, like we are going to make it really clear and transparent to you that they have what you're looking for.
Let me ask you something about this, Noah. So we figured this part out, right? Okay, these are the credentials, these are the badges. Where do we put these badges or credentials? Are they on their resumes? Or are they on their LinkedIn pages so that the algorithms or whatever that are looking for employees, they're going to see these credentials? What's happening with that in that place?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And so there's kind of two parts to that. So let's start with the kind of, let's table for a second where we put these things, because some people who might say, I got a little technical there, and for those people, just earmuffs when we get to that part of that. Too much. But as far as when you talk about the algorithms, when you talk about actually operationalizing the credentials, like that is a huge thing. And some of that is already happening. Some of that is we're still, before we're seeing it happen at scale, like a year and a half out is what I'm hearing from the people who are writing the 7 and 8 figure checks to the in the philanthropic community to build the technological infrastructure for this. But basically, because it depends, and I guess that we should also back up, not all digital badges are created equal. So there are certain badges that are adhere to a technical standard called open badges. And so when your school district is looking at getting a digital badging platform, I would invite you to not just call around and ask everybody who's the best platform. That there's dozens at this point, and start with, what do we need a platform to do for us? So you have a checklist, and when they answer, use their answers to your checklist to figure out who's the best for you and your learning community. But when and one of the questions I would invite people to be asking is, do they issue open badges? Because that is going to play into sharing them on LinkedIn, and you don't just share them in your feed; they're actually in your profile. And when we talk about the metadata, one of the really cool things that's happening that you can't do with just a PDF of a certificate is that metadata is machine readable. And so for that CT program in cybersecurity that has all these learning outcomes, they're mapped to the National Association of Cybersecurity Professionals. Sorry if that's not what it's called, but kind of just making it up down. But I'm sure they have a standards framework, and we're mapping to those, and we can actually, in a machine readable way, point to those standards and say this credential aligns with this standard. And that's going to allow employers to go on to Indeed, to go on to LinkedIn, all these job engines, and they're actually going to be able to do reverse lookups. They're going to be able to say, we know we want people, like we helped write these standards. We know that that's what we need people to know in order to succeed in our organization. So we're looking for credentials that align to that. And so they're going to be able to reverse lookup. And what it leads to, in hiring, and probably honestly in admissions as well one day, is, a lot of times employers are going to be applying to job seekers, not the other way around, because they're going to be able to know through our credentials that we already have some of the things they're looking for, and it's going to be trusted and verifiable. Right now, so much of that is me in an interview convincing you that I have that, but we can do it in a trusted and verifiable way with the badge. So as far as just that kind of operationalizing and sharing it space, you'll earn them. You'll earn them, through the rest of our working lives from multiple organizations using different software vendors to issue the badges, and you'll share them, with employers. You'll share them with admissions, and then that gets to that first question you asked about where do you store them, because it's going to be a real pain to have a login and password to my high school was using this. I'm at the early college in the afternoon taking these classes. They're using a different vendor. I volunteer with this organization. I'm at the Boys and Girls Club. They're using this. So you have you're earning all these badges from all these different platforms. Instead of having to, every time you need to share a badge, go to every single platform and grab links to all of them, you're going to have, there's different words floating around. The original one, you may have heard of the Mozilla Backpack. I think the words are shifting more to, you're starting to hear about wallets. And if people are like, whoa, that sounds a little crypto, like there are definitely some kind of crypto Web3 blockchain,
Elements to it.
players in this space. Like, so 100% that is happening. But one of the other words you're hearing is LER, learning and employment record. And
LER.
so, yes, sir. Yes, sir. LER. And for folks who maybe 10 years ago, we're hearing things about extended transcripts and mastery transcripts. This is sort of the next wave of that, but also, again, recognizing we're not just designing this for 18-year-olds to have something when they go out as well. This is for people starting as early as they start earning credentials through the rest of their working lives. Right? This is the 80-year plan where you're having this learning and employment record where you don't have your transcripts can live on one, your badges that you are earning can live there, your any kind of other awards, certificates, achievements you're getting can live there. And so that you have this sort of just confederated space, right? A wallet. And a wallet, I guess, could contain more than one LER. I should have said that too. They're not one and the same thing. But you will then be able to, when you're applying for a certain job, you're going to be able to go in and curate the relevant things to that job and send them to, right? You're going to click on this. You know what? They do not need to see my, fourth grade swimming certificate, but maybe I'm applying for a water safety job, in which case, yeah, let's bring back that just to, because maybe it's relevant.
So Noah, so that's really interesting. I like where you're going with that. That LER is like more comprehensive in terms of you can see the badge, the competencies tied to it, and then maybe even the verified learning that's tapped into it as well. We had someone on the podcast, my good friend Aaron Shorn out of Hawaii from Unruler, and they work on that verified learning component. So it's like for that competency or that badge, they would be the filler for when you click on it, and then you can see that 60-second CPR, that CPR video. How I want to go back to something you said, because I had a question from a good friend who my friend Jesse, who's they're working on a school concept called Next Prep Academy, right? And it's all about preparing kids for careers, coming out of high school, post-secondary opportunities, that sort of thing. So he's super big on the credentials and the badges. So he had a question. I want to read it to you. I'm curious your take.
Yes, sir.
How are employers coming around to valuing micro-credentials? And then also some reports are saying that their candidate screenings, like the AI, aren't catching the micro credentials. Or are you finding this to be a problem?
I think that's a great question from Jesse. I think that it's an opportunity, that still need, and a challenge that still needs to be addressed to that second piece. And that's where, again, I referenced some of these philanthropic groups that are investing heavily in the space. So there was a last mile, to hire report that came out in November from the Digital Credentials Consortium, where, one of the main things that they, laid out there that's missing in the ecosystem is that HR software is not set up to consume a lot of these credentials yet. And part of that is, they're in this to make money, and they need clients to put pressure on them, to say they need a large clients to say, hey, like, we might not be renewing our contract with you unless, you're setting us up in our applications to consume, these credentials, because right now it doesn't scale well unless you can have, like, to Jesse's point with AI, like, you need this to, like, if you can't have that a single person is sitting there clicking on everything.
Right.
That does not scale well, especially if you have high interest jobs where, you may have hundreds of applicants for a single opportunity. And so, that is a big opportunity. But again, like, that is not, like, in 3 years, I don't know that, people are going to be talking about that as a problem. I think that stuff is just moving so quickly, that yeah, and groups on the industry side. This is not a K-12 thing. This is not a higher ed. This is, the United States Chamber of Commerce, is doing a pilot that they announced in January, and they're moving fast enough that they're saying, right, I don't know if they'll hit it, but it's so ambitious. They're talking about basically taking unstructured data of people's past lived experiences and creating essentially like recommended transcripts, to recognize in verifiable ways their past lived experiences for 25 million Americans before fall of 2023. So we have people outside K-12 and higher ed who are moving fast, who are putting, 7 and 8 figure, kind of efforts into recognizing that this is not just, while, we take, you and I, and, a lot of people listening to this are going to care about our humans, right? That we, on the industry side, if, an employer can better, more efficiently hire and do a better job of knowing before they even select their finalist of who's qualified for this. If they can do a better job once people are internal of retaining people by knowing what their skills, interests, passions are, to not just have them on the bus, but have them in the right seat on the bus. To not have them looking at the next job in front of them for the career ladder, but having a career jungle gym where maybe the next move for you is actually over here in this area you didn't know existed internally. That's just, for some of these large companies that, are bigger than most countries' economies, that's just a no-brainer for them, for why they're investing in this space. So the challenging parts are coming really soon. Like, the opportunity is recognized, and that is, we're not going to be having conversations about that as a problematic thing in just a couple of years. But to Jesse's first point about, are they recognized? I'm sorry, the first part about the question was, he has a sense that they're going to care.
The first part of the question was how employers coming around to valuing the micro credentials.
That's right. I'm sorry. And so I'll give you two answers to that. One is that, we're seeing just like, so state governments, which are some of the largest employers in most states, we've seen just in the last few months, I think a half dozen state governors come out and say, we're going to start eliminating degree requirements for any jobs at the state level that don't require a degree. Like, that is a dumb proxy for us to be using. Like, instead of us saying you must have a bachelor's, you must have like whatever, an associate's, a master's degree in order to even apply for this job. Let's act like, why? What are the skills that are required for this? And let's just name those skills as the requirements instead of using this, proxy for something that may or may not actually, align to those skills. And so, that is going to force a lot of change, right? So the kind of buzzword is skills-based hiring. And SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, came out with a paper a little over a year ago, where they said that over 90% of the employers they surveyed said that they are implementing or plan to implement skills-based hiring. So it's not just going to be state governments; it's going to be everybody. And and again, like, part of it is because it's the right thing to do and it's good for humans, but also these are companies that have to make a profit, and they're recognizing that we are having we are artificially limiting our labor pool by having these terrible proxies for what the requirements are. We have all these people who otherwise would, be applying, who don't see themselves as having a chance. And so, another one of those challenges there is that same SHRM surveys, 7% of hiring managers say they know how to implement skills-based hiring. So there is like going to need to be some work on,
but
dream to reality.
What I'm hearing you saying, it's like we're in this transition right now. So it's happening, it's taking place, but it just may take some time to get the HR software to match up, to recognize the credentials, as well as the big employers, to cut through all the bureaucracy to say it's not a degree we need, it's these skills. If they touch these skills, but then we also have to train those people on how to hire effectively for skills-based hiring. That's
and let's say the quiet part out loud. Let's go the quiet part that needs to be said out loud. There is, we're not just upskilling them to do it more effectively. We're upskilling them to do it more equitably, right? Because it's been really easy to do it, and whether consciously or unconsciously, it's been done very effectively in very biased and inequitable ways. And that needs to change, and is going to change. That when we can match opportunities with humans who deserve access to those opportunities because of their skills and competencies, and not because their last name, their gender, their age, their race, ethnicity, this has changed the world stuff. You know what I mean? And so that's why I've dedicated, a lot of the last, decade of my adult life to this, is because, that this is stuff that it needs to happen.
Noah, I think you're reading my questions. So my next question was, how can micro-credentials help save the world? However, under the context of, and you put that equity thing in there, I was going to ask you, man, you co-founded this amazing summit, the Badge Summit, and I know your 2023 Badge Summit is subtitled "An Exploration of Micro-Credentials, Access, and Equity." So talk to me about that. Like, how are micro-credentials and that access and equity, like, how's that all working together?
And so in just so many ways, right? But so I don't want to repeat the stuff I just said, so I'll go in a different direction. And when we are credentialing stuff, one of the kind of inherent things that happens there, and this is not micro-credential. This is, when we are grading something, right? A grade at the end of a course is, in a sense, a credential, right? A driver's license, a CPR. We talked about that is a credential, right? When we're doing that, an inherent thing that's happening is we have to decide what counts. And something that is not consciously addressed, and that is part of the problem. But hopefully we can, by naming it, make it something that's harder to not be conscious and intentional. That is, somebody has to decide what counts, right? Who decides what counts, and who decides what counts, right? And so one of the things that we're doing at the conference is trying to elevate that stuff, because whether we want to talk about it through just power in general or colonization, like there are historically, who decides what counts tends to be a lot of people who come from similar backgrounds to me, right? And what that does is that privileges certain types of points of view that let's go ahead and say they're fantastic and totally right and deserve to be what counts, and it's leaving out a whole lot of other things, right? That we see, whether we're talking, in communities, like, for example, in Native American, communities, right?
Okay.
There's a great project in Canada that I, learned about, where they're going into the community and saying, what's important here that's not being taught outside their reservation here. And, one of the things is, midwifery, right? And so, a lot of these people live, just, it can take the better part of a day or longer to get to a hospital. And so their culture for thousands of years has not been to go to a Western hospital, right? And, the local medical community is not valuing midwives. They're not credentialing. And so, that they recognize the need for that here's something that is really important. And it is a path to a career for people in that community. And, we can, if we ask our communities what is important, what do you value, what should count, then we can start to credential that. And so, they've, are moving towards doing things like that in these communities. I think, we see it, in a lot of community-based organizations, especially in large metropolitan areas. We see that a lot, right? Where you have, stuff at the policy level is not working, but it's the community organizers, and community-based organizations that are making a difference in the community. What if we're able to actually ask them, so what is it that makes you so effective, right? What is it that's not being taught in school, but can we name the 3 things that make you exceptional at what you're doing, and listen to them. And maybe through that, we can learn about things that we could be, just noticing, naming, and credentialing to just better tell the stories of learning achievement and credential that to help, other people follow in their footsteps to access their successful futures.
Ah, man, that's powerful. That's super powerful. And everything you just said, and I never thought about credentials and badging in that way, like to really create that equitable future. Wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
It's powerful. It's like there is power in deciding what counts. And, I think that's, a lot of times in the trades, because it is, really objective kind of stuff, I really admire and look to the trades for inspiration, right? Because, my brother works, in a CTE program, oversees HVAC, for example. And like, it's very objective, right? It's what counts, but there's also things that,
so no, let me push
competencies.
Let me push you there, right? Because so like for that HVAC class or whatever your brother is overseeing, what is an example, like what are some examples of credentials that someone like should have in the HVAC program? Like how should they think?
So this is I would be so stepping out of any place that I should be speaking to it, because I struggle to know which way to put my filter in when I'm replacing it every month. But
no, let me reframe it, right? Because I'm this is where I'm going with this question. I've had several guests on now who we're talking more competency-based learning, right? So I'm thinking like competencies, not the grade, but the competency says you've learned this subject, you're competent in this, you have domain mastery in this particular thing. Should we go there to a credential? Is that like how you see that? Like from a competency?
And that is one of the opportunities, right? Because, for so going back to that HVAC, and there's so many opportunities, right? Like that HVAC is not being replaced by, AI, right? Like that is they would need humans to do that. And, and with, and people are going to be increasingly, anybody who doesn't have it, that's HVAC's not going away. And
right.
Yeah, like we have those competencies. How are we communicating them? Right now, in a lot of programs, my guess is the competencies we're kind of again going to that summative kind of a view that when you pass this class, here were the competencies, right? Or when you finish the program, get this, industry certification, the competencies, that's serving as a proxy for those competencies. And, I don't know this, but I would imagine that there's examples out there where they had 7 out of 10 of the competencies, and that's why they passed the class, right? Or they had 9 out of 10. So there is an opportunity there to, kind of, say, hey, this is not about replacing grades. This is about granular level storytelling. We are giving a narrative to say, when you leave here, we're equipping you not just with a thing that says you got a B+ in this class. We're equipping you with a badge in this competency, a badge in this competency, and again, when that goes back to the granularity, is there, somebody hiring an HVAC who actually cares about those, right? Like they're going to look at those and say, this is just tell me what, did you pass the class? And then maybe that's too granular. But if they do care about the individual competencies, then, or a suite of competencies, then it works. But I also think there's huge opportunities to get into the essential skills, right? The interpersonal communication, right? Like that's something that, the ability, and not just interpersonal communication, but intercultural competence, right? I mean, in a lot of our communities, we are not, a homogenous community of everybody, looks the same and comes from the same backgrounds. And so, if I own an HVAC company and I'm sending technicians into homes all around the city, and I know they have intercultural competencies that help them have successful, just get along with other humans,
So
regardless of background,
let me ask you
that's
this.
valuable.
Okay, I got like two questions here. So one, I'm gonna stick with this one. We're calling them. I work with my friends at America Succeeds, who actually are out of a lot of them are in Denver, if I'm not mistaken. But the conversations around durable skills, and those durable skills, you believe we should have, or excuse me, not you believe, but you may suggest, like, let's take a look at this. We should consider a badge for communication, collaboration, like teamwork, like some of those things that those what some people may
Active
call.
listening,
Yes,
awareness,
yes.
the stuff that I mean, it's been nearly 20 years since pretty much anybody listening to this has sat through the year of Sir Ken Robinson TED Talk, right? Like,
Right.
like where anything we went to, we had to watch this TED Talk, and everybody got excited and applauded as they're like, these are the skills of the future. We're not an assembly line, thing.
Right.
And the superintendent stood up there and told us these are what we need to be focused on. And a generation later, we're still not naming that on our transcripts. We're still not assessing that. And the important part is not that on the education side we're assessing it. The important miss there is we're not equipping the learners with a credential that recognizes them with our brand on it. Therefore employers should trust it that they have these skills. And that's an equity issue, right?
Yes. You just hit like to my second question. So for two scenarios, your brother in the HVAC class, or talking about these different skills, the interpersonal skills, communication, collaboration, those things, right? Who should issue that credential or that badge? Like, should your brother, who is overseeing the HVAC content or class in the school district, should that credential come from the school district, or maybe some outside industry education body or the curriculum provider? Like, what are your thoughts on that part?
I think that's
in
such a
early
great.
days?
I think that is a great question for every learning community to wrestle with. I don't think there's one right answer, right? Like, I think that the durable skills work at America Succeeds is awesome, right? But let's go back to our earlier conversation about who decides what counts. I mean, if we're going to take the durable skills curriculum from America Succeeds into First Nations group in Canada, are those learners going to be really thrilled about the America Succeeds durable skills curriculum, or are they going to be more interested in somebody else's, or developing their own? And so I think it's like my hope would be that every learning community would say, yeah, this is something that's a good idea for us to prioritize for our learners. I think that is that something that we are developing on our own? Is that something that we are adopting or adapting from someone else? I think that that's a local decision that's really wise for people to have with their community. I do think one thing I will throw out there that is I sort of future cast and do my Nostradamus, which I'm probably wrong about, but
Let's go. Let me hear
because
it.
I know
Go for it.
I predicted
Go
that in
for it.
2017 we'd go to football games and on our glasses we'd see the yellow first down line in our glasses in the stadium, and so I'm wrong about things all the time, Sylvester. But one of the things that I don't think I'm going to be wrong about is when we look at things like these durable skills, essential skills, 21st century skills, whatever we want to call them. One thing that does show up is that like a multiple choice test is probably not going to be a really effective way of assessing it. And that means that assessing it at scale is going to be a big challenge for a lot of places. And so, one of my prediction is that simulations are going to be, the one of the right answers to how do we reliably assess these skills at scale. Is that, whether it's a video game type thing, that there's people working on, things in kind of animated or VR situations, but I think it's going to be simulations, so you can still have machine grading happening, but where it's and that's where some of the AI advances are going to make stuff real exciting real fast. Because building this stuff's going to get a lot easier. But I think that reliably assessing these things at scale is going to be, an awesome opportunity for people to figure out. And I think personally that simulation is going to be where they go with it.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. There was an article on the ACTE website that I sent to you on LinkedIn. When we were talking on our message chat, and I was curious your thoughts on like the gamification aspect of micro credentials, and I wanted to get your take on that.
And I think that anytime you put a finish line in front of people, that there's going to be certain people who are going to race, right? And so I think gamification for a lot of learners is going to be inherent. So that, I think that's where just as educators, that's an opportunity for us to just be intentional, right? And so, a certain degree of gamification probably is baked in. Do we want to make it overt? Do we want to not touch that? And I just think intentionality is what I think is most important. I don't have any dogma about, good, bad. I just think intentionality, is it happening by design or not? And are we okay with that? Are we away? Just being purposeful, I think, is important. I think that, that there's definitely some great work out there and absolutely tons of research that says, when we have incremental, kind of finish lines and goalposts, that, as far as student success can be really helpful for completion, and going back to that notion of meaningfulness and are we credentialing something that, an authentic audience like a hiring manager is going to care about, there's some risk there to our credentialing ecosystem if we have things that are more rooted in just recognition and just gamification than in credentialiness. Those badges would, in my mind, probably pose a risk factor to the larger ecosystem. And so, but that doesn't mean to not do it. That just means to be intentional. So maybe that means we have those, but those are not badges, or we have those, but those are badges that aren't visible external, don't live in the same library, so employers aren't seeing them and creating kind of weird noises in the signals. So I just think it's about intentionality. Like I personally think gamification is awesome. I'm on, I at some point today will start, my phone's going to start getting upset at me because I'm at 82 days of Portuguese on Duolingo and I got to get to 83. So, so I'm here for it, but when it comes to credentialiness, it can be part of it or not. It just needs to be intentional. And I'd say that speaking of games, I think that Epic Games and Unreal Engine, which you probably have a lot of folks in the CTE who are listening to this or work with people who are doing Unreal Engine, they're the stuff on Unreal Engine is kind of gamified curriculum to learn these really great skills and get credentialed in it. And and Unreal Engine's not just being used by video game developers, right? It is, aerospace engineers are using it, architects are using it. So there's a place for it. Is probably what I should have just said.
Yeah, no. I mean, that was a great answer. You got there. You got around to it. Two final questions for you. In terms of building a pipeline for students who come out with said micro credentials to companies that acknowledge those credentials, any suggestions on someone like how they should build those relationships or anything you're seeing in that space?
Yeah. So I think that, on one hand, at the macro level, that's where some of that big stuff that, the infrastructure is being built for with the machine readable and the HR, all that stuff, the HR software, a lot of that is going to do some legwork for us, right? Especially if we're doing alignments to standards, but at local levels, when we built a project that I was I'm just super proud to be a part of in Aurora Public Schools. We're credentialing at the time we were saying 21st century skills, but essential skills, durable skills. And, we from day one decided that it was going to be really important for us that if a, learner raises her hand and says, Mr. Why should I care about these stupid badges? That if our answer was just because you should be intrinsically motivated to learn, like that was going to be a non-starter, that there needed to be a value proposition there. And so we went to, the area community. We went to restaurants in there. We went to people who are hiring, teenagers. And we said, hey, here are these skills that we're going to look at we're going to start credentialing these skills. Are these the types of things you look for when you hire? And they're like, yeah. We said, would you be willing to endorse these skills? And that allowed us to, very quickly get several dozen area employers who essentially had a handshake with the school district where they said, we will recognize your learners' assets and open up doors of opportunities for them. And so, that meant, in early grades, that means they're coming into, the school and doing, job exploration kind of stuff and showing them what they do. And this is everything from, food and beverage to your photography to high tech, stuff. I mean, we use in Colorado, we have this great stuff from the CTE world of the Colorado Career Cluster. And so we use that map in order to make sure that we had representation, from all the clusters and, entry level stuff, high earning stuff, all around the board to say, there's just so many, so that it's not the word I couldn't come up with earlier in our conversation. So it's not perceived as tracking, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is perceived, it's more about, infinite pathway mapping. You have this, and here are infinite directions you can go with it. And don't take our word for it. We're standing in the front of the room telling you, we're yelling about you, yelling at you for the difference between nobody can tell the difference between your cursive G and your cursive Q. Don't listen to us. Listen to them. They're the ones who are actually going to hire you, right? And so, at the middle school and high school levels, it started to look more like, let's leave the school. Let's actually go do an externship. Let's do a job shadow and an exploration. In some cases, like we had I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but a fast food place that a lot of people have heard of, where they said, hey, if you have earned these credentials that we're endorsing, you can come into any of the of our locations in the school district map, and you are guaranteed an interview with a manager. You go straight to the front of the line. You are getting an interview with a manager because of your credential.
So Noah, that I would imagine that increases the motivation for the students to get excited about these badges and micro credentials, right? Did you see that as a result? Like knowing that there's an
yes
outcome.
and no. So I know part of that was focus groups with learners, right? Like, I'm just a big human-centered design person, so we asked learners, what does value proposition mean to you? If you get this, what would make, what's valuable to you that they recognize, right? Like I remember when I was in high school, if you got a 4.0 or participate in sport, you could get a letter jacket and a bar, and there was a movie theater that gave you $1 off, a matinee if you had a bar, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this value proposition, right? And so asking learners what would be valuable to you, and so that gave us then, a starter for that conversation with the employers to say, these are what they're saying, they would value. And I don't want to, our biggest uptake in that particular school district was in K-8. And so, we have some examples at the high school level. I think data is important, and I don't think that our N is not big enough to draw anything other than a couple of anecdotal sort of readings into. So I don't want to say that it had this massive effect on enthusiasm, because we just didn't have the
let me push you
sample
on this.
size.
No, because you touched the conference and everything and so many different perspectives. Any other, like real quickly, any other strategies you've seen that are working to get students excited about micro credentials and badging?
Doing it.
Okay.
Like literally, just don't get ready, get started. Just start doing it, and if they don't get excited, ask them why not. If they get what would we need to? If they got excited, what about this guy you're excited? And there's your data to what so you can be intentional moving forward. I think that's
It's perfect.
Kind because different. It's difficult to generalize it for stuff because what we're credentialing is so different for different populations, and so yeah, I think it's more about just get started. I guess one thing that I would say that I've noticed, especially in K-12 settings, is thinking around, ways to credential educators, because part of the change management implementation does require you to rely on classroom practitioners to be credentialing the learners. And so if your educators have already been on the earning side, there is some data starting to show up that says that they're more likely to be prolific with being issuers themselves.
That's a good idea. Okay, Noah, how can someone get in touch with you? Like, you just dropped so many gems in this conversation about badging, micro credentials. Noah is the go-to resource if you want to have a great keynote speaker for this kind of thing or attend his conference. How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, and I'll do the keynote in Spanish too. I got a chance to go to Colombia right before the pandemic and do my first Spanish language keynote. The badgesummit.com. The is where you can learn about the conference. We thanks to our generous sponsors, are able to keep it just so affordable compared to other conferences. And it's in Boulder, Colorado in the summer, which Sylvester, if you haven't been to Boulder in the summer, it's amazing. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Geisel is my last name. I'm probably the only Noah Geisel there. And anymore, that's the easiest place. I do still tweet at Senior G, SENORG on the Twitter. And yeah, if you're doing great stuff that I can help shine a light on, please let me know. Let me amplify your work and help you get the attention it deserves. And if I can be a resource, please do reach out.
Love it. Love it. Last question. The future. Normally I ask about what's your vision for the future of career tech education, but I'm going to shift and ask you, what's your vision for the future of micro-credentials and badging?
And I think, just going back to the stuff I've repeated several times, I think it's really just, a change the world level. It's about, doing a better job of recognizing awesomeness, naming it and credentialing it and helping to, use that to connect humans with opportunities. And so, it's a tough kind of proposition to argue against. It's pretty apolitical. It's really like I don't know what the counter argument is to that being the right thing to do. And so, I'm really hopeful that it will happen. And, I think that another thing that's a huge opportunity in the space is, that, while we're going to have all this stuff happen with formal, providers, school districts, colleges, community colleges, as well as, industry associations and these kind of formal providers and gatekeepers doing credentialing. I also think that there's going to be, a lot of stuff of just, me being able, if I'm volunteering, and coaching basketball at the Y or something, and, to be able to credential my players and for them to credential each other in teamwork or support. And so I think that there's kind of a democratization and flattening of the power structure there, that there's this whole opportunity for, word that I didn't come up with, but that I really respect, of open recognition, that really any of us can, be bestowing recognition on somebody else, including self-attestations, right? That I can say, I am good at this and here's why. And I think that that's kind of a neat opportunity for the future. But I think, at a macro level, I think it's just going to be, this awesome, way of connecting people, and that it's also not just going to be this North American centric thing, right? That this is happening. There's amazing people leading this work in India, throughout the African continent, and you're just all over the world. This stuff is kind of taking off because, people from all these different kind of domains and expertise areas, wherever you are, this kind of just makes sense as a right answer to some of the questions that are bugging you.
Wow, great answer. Great answer. Noah, thank you for your time today. And I hope as my listeners, you enjoyed this podcast episode. If you did, make sure you connect with Noah, thebadgesummit.com, thebadgesummit.com. Make sure you check that out. check out the work that Noah's doing and leading in this space. Share the podcast with a friend. Don't be selfish with the knowledge. And until the next episode, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Global CTE Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes.